Okay, so now let's go forward. The afternoon session, we have now session 3 starting up, and we have going into practical examples that show how Sami traditional knowledge or traditional cultural expressions have been used, for example, in the first case, in trademarks. So please, I'll give the floor to Martin Berger from the Patent and Registration Office. Please, you have the floor.
Thank you. My name is Martin Berger and I work as a legal advisor at the Swedish International Office, the PRV. I will talk about trademark and design registrations in relation to traditional Sami symbols. The trademark legislations in Sweden, Norway and Finland are based on an EU trademark directive. According to the legislation in these countries, trademark cannot be registered if it's contrary to law, morality or public policy. Earlier legislation referred to offensive marks, which has basically the same meaning. The Norwegian Industrial Property Office, Patentstyret, received a request for revocation where the claimant asked for an invalidation of the trademark you can see in the picture here to the left. The sun symbol is known from the cover. Keep that slide. The sun symbol here is known from the cover of a rewarded book by Nils Aslak Valkeapää called The Sun, My Father. And the sun is inspired by a symbol on a Sami drum found in Åsele Lappmark in Sweden and dated to the 17th century. Patentstyret found the sun symbol being...
Martin, kan jag be dig prata lite långsammare?
Okay. I will start. The Norwegian Industrial Property Office, the Patentstyret, received a request for revocation where the claimant asked for an invalidation of the trademark you can see in the picture here. The sun symbol is known from the cover of a book, a rewarded book by Nils Aslak Valkeapää, and the book is called The Sun, My Father. The sun itself is inspired by a symbol on a Sami drum found in Åsele Lappmark in Sweden, which is dated to the 17th century. Patentstyret found that the sun symbol is of great religious importance in the Sami culture as it represents the sun god Beaivi. Therefore, it should be protected as such and not monopolized in trade. Since a trademark registration would be offensive, the registration was invalidated by a decision from Patentstyret. Now let's have a look at the design legislation. A design could be protected for a limited time, up to 25 years. That is, if it is new and is of individual character. As in the trademark case, the Patentstyret also received a request for invalidation of the design that was owned by a Norwegian jeweler company. Since the claimant could show that the design was not new, but in fact inspired by a traditional sun symbol, the design was invalidated. How is it then possible that trademarks and designs like the sun symbol can be registered in the first place? Well, to answer that question, you must know that it is a very difficult task to examine applications for trademarks and designs. There are no registers containing Sami symbols, words or traditional patterns, etc., as we have for trademarks and company names, for example. Neither do we have any specific legislation regarding traditional Sami symbols. For example, the New Zealand Trademark Act includes an absolute ground for not registering a trademark if the use or registration of the mark would be likely to offend a significant section of the community, including Maori. I have now talked about marks contrary to law or public policy, which are regarded as absolute grounds. There are also relative grounds, which means that it cannot be registered if it, for instance, is likely to be confused with another trademark registered earlier, or if it infringes someone else's copyright, or if it includes the name or the picture of someone else who is alive or not since long dead. We can change slide now. On this slide, you can see some examples of trademark registrations from Sweden and also trade names. 4 of the marks and trade names in this picture are registered for alcoholic beverages. Trademarks are, as some of you know, registered in different classes of goods or services. The word that you can see there, Lappland Nubben. Nubbe means shot, like a shot of vodka. The portrait seen in that mark most likely shows a depiction of the famous Sami artist Nils Nilsson Skum. According to Swedish case law, the name or portrait of a person is protected for 70 years after one's death, which is the same as the copyright time limit. Nils Nilsson Skum passed away 69 years ago. Beagle Holding Company that you can see in this picture is a company name of a textile company. And Beagle is also the name of the wind god. Jokkmokk Sami cheese is another registered trademark. You could ask yourself, should anyone be able to register a mark with the word Sami, or should that be an exclusive right for entrepreneurs from the Sami people? And to conclude this presentation, there is very little case law on this subject matter. In Europe, I am only familiar with these 2 cases from Norway. In Sweden, we have not yet submitted any oppositions or requests for revocation regarding marks containing or consisting of Sami words, symbols, or traditional patterns. If we would receive such a request, it may lead to a decision by the appeal court, and that would be very interesting. Thank you for listening.
Tack så mycket Martin, och vi går vidare genast till följande talare, Rune Fjällheim. Varsågod, gällande Disney-förhandlingarna.
Joo. Pari päiviä kiittopodiumiots. Mun namn Rune Fjällheim ja mun on johtajan Samitikki ja Saamiraadi Oksas Schiethalma Walt Disney Animation Studionen. Tän gick mun kuekte filmaoktavas. Filmatahkit Walt Disney Animation Studios fitne kuekte tuha kuhtnublois tjaktjat saamis. Vietja min inspirationa Jovulan filmi tän numpekkan Frozen Raitus. Sillä era anaris ja karasovas. Sami birrasist täälki tiigastallema. Mis on tal tahpahuva. Lägo nii, että puhta Disney-filmas pohtikin vai sami kulttuurilas elementtei. Lägo veijulas vaatsin saa, että tiigastallet eventuelt muu. Ja juus poht min elementtei kievahit. Ei kuule kohtulas, että puolasi juoga rohtulutta saamai. Täällä ei tuogakin, kun Sami parlamentaaris räddi ofta saamiraadin järvi reive sad Disney. Reivistis odajoimannes kuektua Gafsnoblois Disney CEO Bob Igery. Tietty huvui erehera, että mi ainit, että tässä lyfti ovdamuni, taas, että min kulttuurilas elementtei kieva huvujit. Mutta hän oli sihkarasti, että kieva me saatte niihtellä almanahkai, kohtulas, ja Rehalas. Ja te täytyy, että saami almut lää kirkkus, mielas ja rahkanan falla fiäkki. Sihkarastan tihti alma ja kohtulas. Oudastamme min almukis ja kievahämme min opmudaas. No. Miessämaanu te koettua katsnoblois. Fastidi Walt Disney Animation Studio filmaproducenta Peter del Vecco-bokta. Että si aina sahtit fast jäivadit ja jär ofta oktavuoda olmus käinä sahti kuulahallat. Käsemaanu koettua katsnoblois te väljuvuin mun saamin päälles oktavuoda olmusin. Ja det jälkeen te oftas min päälles rahkanit sietaralla mitä. Te kolkumaanu koettua katsnoblois både Peter del Vecco fassäpmai. Karasjohki. Ja suuspiesaimme vuostsäävä kulla hempusi maisilla pläänemin kievait. Mutta siemmas hui unnan. Kun se on isahtan muisteli per ollu, siinä suolemasvuodan julkaitus ei tiite. Min fastadus leijahti mi aina sahti sin viäkkihit. Ja vaikka asa it siirrä eksperta juovku tiesa, jos pärä tiedä seimme makkar kulttuursvorkis lään tarbu. Semmaste äktodeimme, että tappadasi juoga ruohtulotta saami servulahki. Miten suopadeimme juotki siehtäjit ja juovlamaanu luohpas koettua katsnoblois. Maanamme Los Angelesi, mun, Pia Nordkam ja Jacob Adams. Ties suopadeimme valtuusiehtäjuusa juovlamaanu koetloi vuotspäivä. Ja puoluslei era, että filma mai puhtadu. Tavisaamikilli vedde jouhku asahovu, min experta jouhku asahovu. Vähkä andiitti sin. Niin mai oitsimme sotsai uahpahalli sai saami nuoraja. Ja generellt muodoi formationi saami almukapirra. Veddet juovku älki jetsparkku odeaimaanus koettua oftsnoblois. Ja jotki sikti eivademin ja digitaalit juahkimin olles kiinta. Semmas parkkaimme mai kiitämeltä rahkanahti min nieftari jorgaräitjit ja ierät tasa, että Disney puolasi valti hoktavuoda kuasnu puhtadit tämän filmamaita sammikilli. Dilemma leijä, että me färtimme sin rahkanit, mutta et saattaa muistelia, että oli Disney pidä saakka ja makka filma pidä saakka leike. Tjakchamanus koettua oftsnoblois kärvistuvui almulas versioner sietadusas. Ma min president ja Peter del Vecco det källe puolelle. Ja tämän lehti vara puhk hodjon. Ja jos ehtelä hoinandan te sahta sihkarit tämän anna, tämän saat tiedä, mutta hoinu tässä slaidsi. Huassin sietadusas leijat saami mai poutujuvui maailman vuostoschailmassis kauppamanus Los Angeles. Ja då on det manne presidentet ja sin samma aksa snjeitat. Tämä jätti stora formationer i maailmanmedias min bidra. Skapmamanu luohpas koettua oftsnoblois. Lei outa chailmas jikmun filmas. Ja era tavvirikka i kielversiones. Ja då blev Roksran och Dahpahus håller Samis, Oslus, Stockholmas ja Helsingis. Tästä oli almulas vastaus tjäjelmas joulumanu, kuinka oli 5 päivää, kuinka tuo oftsun blois. No. Mai ahpaimme tämän prosessissa. No, vuosittaitin teille ei annettu, että äktön takka sieltä minä lähti minä 8 vuotta. Ja takka ei pidä, että minä olin tjäjit, että tässä lää oftsparku veijulas vuodet. Nuppi lähti min färt sihkrasti, että takka kallik sieltälit, että teille mandaata. Että tuossa vältti alkai dialoga externa aktörer. Kolmalle mä vahvaimme leä, että tällä huiteelassa, että tuossa kulttuurilla ääntijuumi maittain noppekoului. Tämän kuapsakoului. Ja okta ovdemärkades lää, että kuapsapäälle färtimme vahpatan tai suolemas vuoden julkaisemi toima noppepäällessä. Ja tällä tietysti jäljet olisi sitä, että missä läkki iskeltäisi hastelusset. Tällä vähtis, kun on parkati. Kolman jäljen riikkäi patsilja sihkerästi, että puhkella meiltä min päällessä. Viides leija, että tässä lää veulas tuollat min prinsiippai. Semmas komi te parka konkreetta joutusin. Kuudas leija, että äikki taafus te lyftimme kalkan pahtit auttalas sisä. Pohdimme vähän mangi sisä. Tsihts lää, että tuossa skietalla munni, niin että tuossa tämmöinen fleksibiliteetti ja sähti jodani fastiit. Ja mangimus, mi lyfti molsajakton. Hokta tjälkä molsajakton lyfti, että sen päälle sai lyfti tarpsana på fastiike. No. Ja det gitan mun päälles ja valtan ainas kajalta jusla aikias. Kiitos.
Kiitos, Rune. So thank you for this presentation. I think this is an excellent example of interaction, communication between completely different cultures and nations. And we have a lot of things to learn from this and have it as a basis for future. So I thank you for this. And then we have the next speaker, Eero Niemelä, who will speak about the ways that the Sami traditional knowledge can be taken into consideration in research and negotiations. Please, Eero, thank you very much.
Thank you. I have 2 slides and I try to follow your recommendation to keep my presentation shorter. Therefore, the first slide is something like introduction. This headline is Traditional Knowledge from the Fishery and Ecology of Salmon and Other Fish Species covers huge geographical area. This speech is concentrated to Tana-Teno system. Salmon and trout are migrating over 1,100 kilometers within Teno system, tributaries included. That is huge area. You can imagine it is covering like this stretch from Helsinki to Nuorgam, the whole Finland. And you should understand that within that area, the river system is varying geographically. It's lakes, pools, different habitats. And therefore, there is a lot of experience and local knowledge from the fishery, fish species over a long time. Also, other fish species like brown trout, whitefish, grayling, pike, burbot, etc., have even larger distribution area. A local fisher have been fishing earlier within their nearby areas, using net fishing methods mainly, today in larger areas with rods. So the time has changed the tradition. After the roads have been built along the Tana, the traditions have changed in the fishery and also the knowledge. Due to the large river system, fishers have knowledge, especially from their own fishing areas. And that knowledge, it comes from their fathers and fathers' fathers. It is mainly inherited knowledge. Fishers in Teno mainstem, like in estuary area, Lower Teno, Middle Teno, Upper Teno, Karasjohka, Jesjohka, have knowledge which varies between the areas. Fishers have special knowledge also from numerous tributaries where knowledge varies between themselves and differs also from basic data from Teno mainstem. Can I have the next slide? Okay, here you can see the headlines, and I just tell the number of headline and speaking the text after that. Headline 2. Earlier, salmon fishery took place mainly with weir, driftnet, seine. Some effective weirs, which closed the entire Teno River, allowed families from Finnish and Norwegian side to fish together, and the catch was divided between themselves. So they really had cooperation, and usually those persons, they were relatives. People wanted to have salmon catch in short time and effectively. Why? Because they had many other things to do during the short summertime. The use of small weirs became more effective with new materials in nets. Salmon fishery with weirs has been quite stable in terms of technical structure. Very old pictures from weirs show that the weirs look exactly the same nowadays. Salmon as a food has been extremely important during the entire summer and later on also in economy when some of the catch was transported to Norway. That was very important for people living in the upper part of Tana to sell the fish. And when they brought the fish to the cities, to the villages, at the same time they bought certain things which they needed during the wintertime. Social life was important when they used seine or driftnet together with Norwegian fishermen. After 2017, prohibition of seine fishing stopped this kind of social life. Traditional knowledge from one generation to the next generation goes from parents to children, and for example, the sites of weirs, good driftnet fishing sites, seine sites, behavior of salmon, etc. Those are the things which goes from fathers and women to their children. Headline 3, salmon catch indicates the size of the stock. locals remember.
May I Eero, ask if you could focus on 6 and 7, which would be the ones that focus on this how traditional knowledge can be taken into consideration, just in order, just because of the time that we.
Yes, I jumped to the point 6. I, as a researcher, have usually been visiting fishers when they have been in active fishery with weir, gillnet, seine, and driftnet. Those visits have helped me as a researcher to understand that there are a lot of things which are affecting to the successful catches. Fishermen have told me the behavior of salmon in the river and their explanation for me from the behavior. For example, the behavior of salmon in spawning ground and how salmon as kelp is migrating downstream in the following spring after spawning. Nowadays, the research for other fish species has been pike research, which was initiated by locals. For example, Fisher came to me and told that he has caught increasing number of salmon with light-colored meat. He was wondering that, and that was not normal for Tana red-colored meat. He told that at sea there has been effective crab shrimp fishery and therefore the color was light. I studied the scale of that salmon and found that it was previously spawning salmon, which are not feeding shrimps and are not migrating far from the Tana fjord. Therefore, the meat color was light. Many fishers have been participating in the salmon scale project since 1974 to follow long-term changes in the CH structure, ascending time, and especially the occurrence of salmon which has escaped from coastal salmon cage culture. Locals have received annually results from their salmon scales. Headline 7. Local fishers have been included as delegates when negotiating fishing rules for 1979, 1990, and finally 1917. Their impact to formulate fishing rules has been variable. They have had good possibility earlier between the years 1979 and 1990 rules to propose restrictions to tourist fishery, and they have succeeded in that. A lot of discussion has raised over the years from the salmon fishing period in summer, weekly fishing period, fishing in tributaries. The difficulty has been, especially earlier, the fact that fishers in the Norwegian side of the river should agree with fishers on the Finnish side. One example from the rules 1979, fishers in the upper area Tana system wanted to have shorter weekly fishing time for net fisheries to allow salmon to migrate upstreams. The fishers in the lower and middle tenor did not want shorter weekly fishing time. Weekly fishing time has been shorter since 79. Many fishers in upper areas in Tana system, like in Anarjohka, Karasjohka, Jäsjohka, and also in tributaries, informed that their catches improved clearly after 1979 and also spawning stock increased based on the juvenile salmon studies. And finally, local fishers should have better possibilities when countries are negotiating Tana, Teno fishing rules and agreements, especially when discussing and formulating the fishery of other fish than salmon. Also, when discussing who has fishing rights and which method he could use. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Eero. These are very important issues for the Sami, and it's important that traditional knowledge is taken into consideration, for example, in in the research about fishing equipment and methods. So, okay, thank you for this speech. And next, we will have Brigitte Vedzina, who will talk about the indigenous people's traditional cultural expressions and the fashion industry. Yeah, you're very welcome, Brigitte. Please, you have the floor.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Anna, for the invitation. I will try to be brief, even though there is lots I would like to talk about. It's a real passion of mine. So I've been studying the use of traditional cultural expressions in fashion, and you probably heard many times that there's been some cases in the media about cultural appropriation and how fashion designers are taking traditional designs or motifs and incorporating them in their fashion productions without permission from the people who have been holding these traditional cultural expressions for a very long time. And I was interested in the concept of cultural appropriation because that's often how it's being related in the media. And I was interested in understanding what do we mean by cultural appropriation, and I found that there isn't really a unanimously accepted definition, but I was able to identify 4 factors that I think, if they are present, we can be confronted with an issue of cultural appropriation. And so the first factor is the use of a traditional cultural expression. It could be a legend, it could be a dance, but in the case of fashion, it will be probably a design, a textile, piece of jewelry, for example. It's used in a different cultural context. Often it happens in a situation of power imbalance where the one who is taking the traditional cultural expression is from a relatively dominant culture. The third factor is that there isn't any involvement from the source culture, so they're not acknowledged, there is no payment, no remuneration, and of course, no permission asked. And the fourth factor is this results in harm to the source culture. So it can be economic harm because the source culture doesn't participate in the economic benefits. It could also be social harm where the identity of the source culture is being diluted or is being portrayed in an offensive way. Or there could be cultural harm where the cultural meaning of the traditional cultural expression is lost in the process. And I was interested in looking in how that manifests in fashion. What I saw is that designers often take these traditional cultural expressions and they reuse them out of context in ways that will disregard or misinterpret the cultural significance, and that can then cause harm. And the reason for that is that what I found is that most traditional clothing is not simply functional or ornamental, but it's infused with meaning. And that meaning is part of the identity of the communities that use it. So that's why copying designs without consideration for the underlying cultural significance can erode the identity of a whole community. So for the sake of time, I will quickly go to what I came up as advice or principles for good behavior. So my research was really geared towards fashion designers and how they can seek inspiration from various cultures so that they don't feel they're limited in their freedom of creation, but to do it in a non-appropriating and a respectful way. So I came with 4 steps to engage in non-harmful practices. The first is to use with respect. So to research the culture and make sure that you understand the meaning that's embedded in a and not that meaning. The second principle is to give credit where credit is due. So to acknowledge the source, to use as little as possible and then add a lot of your own imagination. Of course, always with respect, because sometimes the transformation can also be disrespectful. So that is to be balanced with the first principle. And lastly, well, to ask for permission from the community to engage in a genuine dialogue, to enter into collaboration, and to share in mutually beneficial ways. Sometimes it can be monetary benefits, but sometimes there could be another sort of relationship that can be mutually beneficial. And Anna, if you want to go back to the slide just before, that was an example that I came across of Sami culture, where it was a designer who used some of the, excuse my pronunciation, but the gakti, I think it's called, the traditional dress, and the ribbons that are usually on the traditional dress were used in a way that didn't respect their meaning, their significance, the way that they were placed on the dresses. Right, exactly that slide. And this is not something that I've studied personally, but I found it being discussed in the paper that's mentioned there. And if I may read from that quote, for the Gudrun Knoten costume, Sjødin took inspiration from the pattern lower part, the holby of the Sami traditional costume, the gakti. The ribbons on this part of the costume traditionally articulate a specific relationship to kin and connection to a specific locality, and customs dictate how the ribbons are used, but people also take pride in the flexibility offered by the gakti. But the holby, however, articulates specific landscape and landscape attachments, as well as kinship relationship. And in the designer's collection, this tradition was not respected. So I will leave it at this and hope to have a discussion about this. I look forward to the conversation that will follow. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Brigitte. These are the, I think, most known issues probably with regard to TCEs and indigenous TCEs. I think we've all read about this in the media, and now we have the real opportunity to discuss among experts of IP and experts in TK and TCEs about what to do next. And I think one of those four principles are definitely a good basis for discussion. We could have a 5-minute break now. I suggest that we have a 5-minute break before we go to the panel discussion about the possible items that we will take up in the next year's event in the Nordic Council of Ministers presidency program, as well as answer the two questions that were raised about what are the next steps to enhance the protection of Sami TK TCEs, and how we could improve that TK and TCEs are taken into consideration in the decision making that concerns the Sami. So now we go for a 5-minute break, and we will come back at 2:27. So 5 minutes break.